Kofi Mensah, his back aching from a day spent scrubbing floors in the glittering offices of Lomé, knew instinctively that something was wrong. The air in Mr. Jean-Pierre Dubois' penthouse suite felt thick, with a tension far heavier than the usual Friday evening quiet. Dubois, a man whose wealth was as ostentatious as his collection of tribal art, paced his opulent living room like a caged tiger. His usually impeccably tailored suit was disheveled, and his face, usually a mask of suave indifference, was contorted with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "It's gone, Kofi," Dubois spat, his voice barely a whisper, yet vibrating with an intensity that made Kofi flinch. $20,000. Vanished. From my safe, no less. Kofi's heart hammered against his ribs. $20,000? That was more money than he could ever dream of earning in a lifetime of honest work. He felt a cold dread creep up his spine. Dubois' gaze, usually dismissive, was now sharp, accusatory, and fixed squarely on him. "You were the only one here today, Kofi. Besides myself, of course," Dubois continued, his words dripping with suspicion. "You had access to the entire suite. You cleaned my study, where the safe is concealed." Kofi stammered, his usual eloquence deserting him. "But, Mr. Dubois, I never touched anything other than the cleaning supplies. I wouldn't dare. You know my record. I've worked for you for 5 years. And loyalty, Kofi, can be bought or broken by temptation," Dubois sneered, his eyes narrowing. "That money was for a very sensitive transaction. Its disappearance will have severe consequences." The implication hung heavy in the air. Dubois wasn't just accusing him of theft, he was threatening him. A man who prided himself on his integrity felt a surge of indignation. Yet, what could a poor cleaner do against the word of a powerful billionaire? He was trapped, caught in a web of suspicion spun by a man who saw the world through the lens of his own immense privilege. The image of his small, humble home, a stark contrast to Dubois' extravagance, flashed in his mind. This accusation could destroy everything he had built, meager as it was. His reputation, his livelihood, even his freedom were suddenly on the line. He swallowed hard, trying to maintain his composure. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that his life was about to become infinitely more complicated. The following morning, the Dubois penthouse, usually a sanctuary of quiet luxury, buzzed with an unwelcome energy. Not the police, as Kofi had half expected, but rather Dubois' personal security detail, a formidable duo named Mark and Estelle, both with the hard-edged look of ex-military personnel. They moved with a silent efficiency that was far more intimidating than any uniformed officer. Kofi, summoned back to the scene, was led to a small, sterile interrogation room within the penthouse itself, a stark contrast to the opulence just beyond its walls. Mark, a man whose face seemed permanently etched into a grim frown, began the questioning. "Tell us, Kofi, exactly what you did yesterday. Every single detail. Don't leave anything out." Kofi recounted his day meticulously, from the moment he arrived at 8 a.m. until his departure at 6 p.m. He described dusting the ornate furniture, vacuuming the plush carpets, and polishing the marble surfaces. He explained how he had cleaned Dubois' study, carefully avoiding the large, framed painting that concealed the safe. "I never even looked behind it, sirs. It's Mr. Dubois' private space." Estelle, whose eyes missed nothing, interjected. "Did you see anyone else enter the suite yesterday? Any visitors, deliveries, or other staff?" "No, madam," Kofi replied, shaking his head. "Only Mr. Dubois was here, in his study for most of the day. He came out once for a coffee break, but he went straight back in." Mark placed a small digital voice recorder on the table between them. "Mr. Dubois is a very busy man, Kofi. He has enemies, rivals, but he also values trust, the trust he placed in you." The implication was clear. Betraying that trust carried a heavy price. Kofi felt a cold sweat break out on his brow. He knew he was innocent, but how could he prove it? He had no alibi, no witnesses. He was alone against the immense power of Jean-Pierre Dubois. The weight of the accusation pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe. He thought of his mother, who had instilled in him a strong sense of honesty, and the shame this accusation would bring upon their family name. He squeezed his eyes shut for a moment, trying to find a flicker of hope in the suffocating darkness of his predicament. The security duo exchanged a glance, their expressions unreadable, and Kofi knew, with a sinking feeling, that they already saw him as guilty. He could almost feel the walls closing in. The days that followed were a blur of relentless scrutiny for Kofi. He wasn't fired, not yet, but he was suspended, his meager income abruptly cut off. His identity, usually invisible in the sprawling metropolis, now felt exposed, tainted. Dubois' security team, Mark and Estelle, seemed to be everywhere. They visited his humble home in a quiet working-class neighborhood, their expensive car an anomaly on the dusty streets. They spoke to his neighbors, their questions veiled but pointed, hinting at the severe nature of the missing money. Kofi's mother, a woman of unwavering faith and quiet dignity, faced their inquiries with a stoic defiance that made Kofi proud, even as it deepened his sense of despair. "My son is an honest man," she told them, her voice firm despite her advanced years. "He works hard. He would never steal." Yet the seeds of doubt had been sown. Whispers followed Kofi wherever he went. Shopkeepers gave him wary glances. Even some of his friends, though outwardly supportive, held a subtle distance in their eyes. The stigma of being accused by a powerful man like Dubois was a heavy burden, a stain that was hard to wash away. He felt like an outcast, his reputation crumbling around him. Meanwhile, back at the penthouse, Mark and Estelle meticulously reviewed surveillance footage from the building's common areas, though none covered the interior of Dubois' private residence. They analyzed entry and exit logs, cross-referencing every visitor, every delivery. They even checked with other staff members, from the concierge to the occasional caterer, but found no anomalies that pointed to an outside intruder having gained access to Dubois' inner sanctum. Dubois, meanwhile, remained coolly detached, observing the investigation from a distance. He occasionally gave instructions, his voice calm but his eyes sharp, unwavering in his belief that Kofi was the culprit. He saw Kofi's poverty not as a circumstance, but as a motive, a weak link in his otherwise secure world. Kofi, alone in his uncertainty, spent his days replaying every moment of that fateful Friday. He tried to remember anything, any detail, no matter how small, that might exonerate him. But his memory offered no grand revelations, only the mundane routine of his cleaning duties. He felt an immense frustration, a desperate need to clear his name. He knew he had to do something, anything to uncover the truth, because relying on Dubois' justice felt like a slow, agonizing descent into an inescapable nightmare. The pressure was mounting, suffocating him. He had to find another way. Desperate, and with nowhere else to turn, Kofi sought advice from his elder cousin, Adisa, a resourceful woman who ran a small but thriving market stall. Adisa listened intently, her brow furrowed with concern as Kofi poured out his story, the shame of the accusation heavy in his voice. "You must not simply accept this, Kofi," Adisa declared, her voice firm. "Mr. Dubois is a powerful man, but he is not infallible. There must be another explanation." Adisa, possessing a shrewd understanding of human nature and a network of connections throughout Lomé, began to make discreet inquiries. She didn't seek information about Dubois' finances, but rather about the man himself, his habits, his relationships, his reputation beyond the polished facade of his wealth. She spoke to vendors who supplied his penthouse, to other cleaners who occasionally worked in the building, even to former employees who had crossed paths with the enigmatic billionaire. One afternoon, Adisa returned to Kofi's home, a peculiar glint in her eye. I spoke to a former chef who worked for Dubois for a short period, she began, lowering her voice. He mentioned something odd. Dubois apparently is particular about his evening routine. Very particular. Kofi leaned forward, his heart quickening. What kind of particular? He has a nightly ritual, Adisa explained. Every evening before retiring, he reviews his business dealings, often making late-night calls. And, she paused, allowing the detail to sink in, he always has a strong black coffee by his side. It helps him focus, he says. The chef also mentioned that Dubois has a rather peculiar allergy. An allergy? Kofi repeated, confused. What could an allergy possibly have to do with missing money? To a very common, yet often overlooked, ingredient, Adisa said, a faint smile playing on her lips, certain types of nuts. He's very careful about what he consumes, but the chef said that he once witnessed Dubois having a severe reaction after accidentally ingesting something with hidden nut traces. He became disoriented, confused, barely coherent. It was quite the scene. A sudden, electrifying thought sparked in Kofi's mind. He had cleaned the study late that afternoon. Dubois had been in there, making calls. And yes, he remembered seeing the coffee cup on the desk. Could this seemingly innocuous detail be the key? A wave of renewed hope, mixed with a healthy dose of trepidation, washed over him. He felt a stirring of purpose, a plan beginning to form in the chaotic landscape of his mind. This was the first concrete lead he had, a chance to shift the narrative, to prove his innocence not with pleas, but with undeniable truth. Armed with Adisa's revelation, Kofi's perspective shifted. He replayed that Friday afternoon in his mind, not as a victim, but as an observer. He remembered the specific tasks he had performed in Dubois' study. He had dusted the mahogany desk, carefully wiping around the coffee cup that sat beside a stack of business papers. He recalled the faint, nutty aroma that had seemed to emanate from the cup, an odor he had dismissed as merely the rich scent of Dubois' expensive coffee blend. But now, it took on a sinister significance. He also remembered another detail. Dubois had been unusually agitated that day, even for him. He had seen him pacing, talking loudly on his phone, and running a hand through his hair, a gesture of stress Kofi rarely witnessed. Dubois had even snapped at him briefly when Kofi had accidentally nudged a stack of magazines. This wasn't the usual composed, aloof billionaire. Kofi's mind raced. If Dubois had suffered an allergic reaction, even a mild one, it could have impaired his judgment, made him disoriented. Could he have mistakenly moved the money himself, perhaps in a fit of confusion, and then forgotten where he put it? It was a long shot, but it was the only plausible alternative to his own guilt. He knew he couldn't simply accuse Dubois of being forgetful or disoriented. It wouldn't hold up. He needed proof. But how could he get it? He was barred from the penthouse, under suspicion. He needed a way to observe Dubois without being seen, to confirm his theory about the allergic reaction. Adisa, ever the pragmatist, suggested, Dubois lives on the top floor. Are there any other high-rise buildings nearby that would offer a view into his apartment? Kofi thought hard. There's the old hotel across the street, the L'Étoile du Soir. It's mostly abandoned now, but the upper floors might still be accessible. It would be a perfect vantage point. The plan was risky, bordering on reckless. If caught trespassing, Kofi would only deepen his predicament. But the alternative, a lifetime of wrongful accusation and a ruined name, was far worse. He knew he had to take this chance. He had to prove his innocence, not just for himself, but for his mother, for Adisa, and for the integrity he held so dear. He felt a newfound resolve hardening his spirit. He would not be a pawn in Dubois' game. He would uncover the truth, no matter the personal cost. The game, he realized, was far from over.
Under the cloak of darkness 2 nights later, Kofi and Adisa navigated the crumbling corridors of the abandoned L'Étoile de Soie Hotel. The air was thick with dust and the eerie silence of neglect, but they pressed on, their footsteps echoing softly. They finally reached the uppermost floor, the former presidential suite, its windows directly facing Dubois' penthouse across the bustling street. With a pair of binoculars Adisa had borrowed from a friend, Kofi began his vigil. He watched Dubois' apartment, a starkly illuminated stage in the night. The first night yielded little. Dubois was visible, occasionally moving about, but nothing out of the ordinary. The second night, however, brought a flicker of activity that sent a jolt through Kofi. Around 10 p.m., Dubois entered his study. Kofi watched as he settled into his armchair, picked up a document, and then, crucially, poured himself a steaming cup of coffee from a silver carafe. As he sipped, he began to review papers, but his movements seemed off. He rubbed his temples frequently, his gaze occasionally drifting, unfocused. Then, the moment of truth. Dubois reached for a small, intricately carved wooden box on his desk, a box Kofi remembered seeing but never paying much attention to. He opened it, revealing a selection of artisanal chocolates, a gift perhaps. He selected one, popped it into his mouth, and continued to read. Within minutes, the change in Dubois was undeniable. His pacing became more erratic. He dropped a pen, fumbled with his papers, and even stumbled slightly as he moved towards a bookshelf. His face, through the binoculars, appeared flushed, his eyes a little glazed. He spoke into his phone, but his gestures were exaggerated, his head shaking as if in frustration. He was experiencing a reaction, a disorientation. Kofi felt a surge of triumph, mixed with a chilling realization. The wooden box. He remembered wiping around it but never opening it. Had Dubois stored his special snacks there? And if those snacks contained the very nuts he was allergic to, perhaps inadvertently, then the picture became clearer. Dubois wasn't simply agitated, he was compromised. His movements, his reactions, all pointed to a mind momentarily clouded. Kofi was right. He's unwell. Kofi knew this was it. This was the opening he needed. But simply observing wasn't enough. He needed tangible proof that the $20,000 had not been stolen, but rather misplaced. He needed to get inside, not as a cleaner, but as an investigator, and find where Dubois, in his compromised state, might have hidden his own fortune. The stakes had never been higher.
The following day, Kofi put his plan into motion. He knew he couldn't simply walk into Dubois' penthouse. He needed an excuse, something that would grant him access without raising immediate suspicion. He called the building's concierge, feigning concern. "I believe I left my cleaning cloth in Mr. Dubois' study," he said, his voice carefully modulated. "It's a special one, very expensive, and I can't replace it easily. Could I perhaps retrieve it this evening?" The concierge, accustomed to Dubois' peculiar demands for perfection, agreed after a quick, exasperated call to Dubois himself, who, still feeling the lingering effects of his episode, granted permission, likely wanting to avoid further trivial interruptions. That evening, with a nervous flutter in his stomach, Kofi re-entered the opulent penthouse. Mark and Estelle were not present, a stroke of luck. Dubois was in his living room, sipping what looked like chamomile tea, his face still a little pale. "Just get your rag, Kofi," he grumbled, barely looking up from his tablet, "and be quick about it." Kofi entered the study, his heart pounding. The room was exactly as he remembered, save for the absence of the coffee cup and the open chocolate box. He moved deliberately, pretending to search for his lost cloth, while his eyes meticulously scanned every surface, every shadow. He checked beneath the desk, behind the bookshelves, even inside the large, empty wastepaper basket. Nothing. He felt a pang of despair. Had his theory been wrong? Had Dubois truly been robbed? And by someone else? Then his gaze fell upon a particularly ornate antique globe that stood in the corner. Dubois often boasted about its rarity. Kofi remembered wiping dust from its polished surface, but he had never truly examined it. He noticed a faint, almost imperceptible scratch near the base, and a small, stiff latch that seemed out of place. Curiosity overriding caution, he pressed the latch. With a soft click, the top hemisphere of the globe swung open, revealing a hidden compartment within. And there, nestled among velvet lining, neatly stacked and secured with a rubber band, were bundles of cash. 20,000 US dollars. Kofi's breath hitched. He had found it. The missing money, precisely where Dubois, in his disoriented state, must have put it for safekeeping, then forgotten. The realization hit him with the force of a tidal wave. He wasn't a thief. He was innocent. And Dubois, the arrogant billionaire, had been his own unwitting saboteur. A scandalous, juicy truth, indeed. Kofi carefully closed the globe, his mind racing. He couldn't simply announce his discovery. Dubois would never admit his own folly, especially not to his cleaner. He needed a way to present the truth that would expose Dubois' error without humiliating him publicly, yet still clear his own name definitively. He returned to the living room, a subtle, knowing glint in his eye. "Mr. Dubois," Kofi began, his voice calm, "I believe I have found something of yours, something you might have misplaced." Dubois looked up, annoyed. "What are you talking about, Kofi? Just take your rag and go." "I believe," Kofi continued, walking deliberately towards the globe in the study, "that when you were perhaps feeling unwell the other day, you may have put your $20,000 in a rather clever hiding spot. A place so clever, in fact, that you might have forgotten it yourself." Dubois' eyes narrowed. He followed Kofi into the study, a mixture of irritation and dawning suspicion on his face. Kofi calmly pressed the latch on the globe. As the top hemisphere swung open, revealing the neatly stacked cash, a profound silence descended upon the room. Dubois stared at the money, then at Kofi, his face a kaleidoscope of emotions: shock, disbelief, dawning comprehension, and finally a profound, chilling embarrassment. The carefully constructed facade of the infallible billionaire crumbled. I don't understand," Dubois stammered, but his eyes, now wide with realization, betrayed him. He remembered the nutty chocolate, the disorientation, the frantic urge to secure his money. Kofi looked directly at him, his gaze unwavering. "Mr. Dubois, I am an honest man. I have always been. Your accusation, born of your own temporary confusion, nearly ruined my life. I found your money. Now I expect my name to be cleared and my reputation restored." Dubois, cornered and utterly exposed, knew he had no recourse. To deny it would be to expose his own fallibility and the ludicrousness of his accusation. The scandal would be immense. He had accused an innocent man, a poor man, of stealing, only to find the money in his own secret hiding spot as a result of his own oversight exacerbated by an allergic reaction. You are right, Kofi," Dubois finally conceded, his voice barely a whisper. "My apologies. A grievous error on my part. Your name will be cleared, immediately. And, of course, you will be compensated generously for your inconvenience." Kofi had not only cleared his name, but had also inadvertently exposed the vulnerability beneath Dubois' impenetrable exterior. He had achieved his goal, not through malice, but through quiet perseverance and a sharp intellect. As he left the penthouse that night, a substantial, discreetly handed envelope of compensation in his pocket, Kofi knew that the truth, no matter how inconvenient or scandalous, always found a way to surface. He walked taller, a quiet victor in a battle he had never sought, his integrity restored, and his future finally his own.